The rope broke. He hit the ground, and for a moment nobody moved. This was not a rescue. There was no intervention, no last-minute pardon riding in from somewhere. The execution had proceeded exactly as planned until the moment it didn't. And now an entire story built around the certainty of his death had no procedure for what came next. In that era, what the public knew and what had actually happened were rarely the same thing. Information moved through layers, official reports, whispered corrections, and then the people actually believed, which was usually somewhere between the two. Governments did not need to lie about everything. They only needed to control which questions got asked. Accusations in that period carried a different weight. Once a name appeared in the wrong document, connected to the wrong person, the facts behind it became almost irrelevant. The process itself was the punishment. Investigations were performances of authority, and everyone watching understood that. People learned not to speak openly because they had watched what happened to those who did. So when this particular execution was ordered, the public received one version: clean, authorized, final. But the officials who were present that day filed reports that did not quite match each other. Nobody explained why. The man who survived had not been selected for execution randomly. That much became clear later, through the pattern of what happened before the sentence was ever announced. His name had appeared in reports that were not about him, meetings he did not know, reference decisions that would not become visible until months later. The charge itself was thin. People who knew the case, and very few were willing to say openly, understood that the evidence presented had been assembled backward. From the filing of charges to the sentencing, the process moved at a pace that gave no one time to examine it carefully. That pace was not accidental. Witnesses who might have offered contradicting accounts were not called. Two who had submitted written statements found those statements absent from the official record. One of them later said he had been visited, not threatened, he insisted, just visited by men he did not recognize 2 days before the trial concluded. After the execution failed, something shifted in how officials were communicating with each other. Internal correspondence from that period, which surfaced much later, showed an unusual volume of messages being exchanged between offices that had no formal connection to the case. The language in those messages was careful, structured in a way that avoided naming anything directly. One report referred to the failed execution as a procedural irregularity requiring resolution. Another used the phrase outcome confirmation. Neither document explained what resolution or confirmation meant in practical terms. The public version remained stable. The sentence had been carried out. Justice had been served. But 3 people who had been present at the execution were transferred to different posts within a week. No explanation was given for any of the transfers. The outcome had been decided. What nobody had planned for was the moment the rope gave way and left the decision unfinished. What happened next was not a decision made in the moment. The documents that emerged later made that clear. There had been a contingency, a written procedure, prepared before the execution took place, outlining exactly what officials were to do if the sentence was not carried out completely. The paper existed. It had been signed. Someone had anticipated this. When the man was found breathing, the senior official present did not hesitate. There was no visible panic, no consultation. He referenced the procedure, and the process simply continued as if the interruption had been a technical delay rather than a man surviving his own death. The crowd that had gathered to witness a conclusion watched something stranger instead, an institution refusing to absorb what it had just seen. Officials are moving with the specific kind of focus that comes not from certainty, but from the fear of what uncertainty would cost them. No public statement addressed what had happened. No inquiry was announced. Within the official documentation of that day, the failed execution does not appear as a failure. It appears as a completed process with a secondary phase. The truth had not been suppressed. It had simply been recategorized before anyone could name it. The official record closed the case cleanly. What the witnesses remembered was harder to contain. Most said nothing for years. not from loyalty to any particular version of events, but because speaking meant choosing a side in a dispute the institution had already declared resolved. The man himself existed in the records as both executed and alive, depending on which document you consulted. Nobody corrected the contradiction. Correcting it would have required explaining it. Those who had been present scattered into ordinary lives. What they had seen became something they carried privately, not something they discussed. The institution that had ordered the execution continued operating. Its authority was never formally questioned. He lived. That part is documented. Whatever the official records preferred to suggest. He ate, he moved through the world, he aged. By every physical measure, the execution had failed. But survival and return are not the same thing. People who encountered him in the years that followed described someone who had developed a particular quality. Not grief, not damage in any visible sense, more like a permanent awareness that the boundary between living and not living was far less fixed than most people needed to believe. He had been on the other side of that boundary. The state had placed him there. And when the rope broke, nobody, not the officials, not the crowd, and perhaps not him, ever fully accepted that he had come back.